right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rachel Wesson. I am the Events and Communications Specialist here at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's discussion titled Tech and Justice, Navigating Harms in the Digital Age, in which we are joined by members of the Berkeley Underground Scholars, which is a program that creates pathways for incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, and system-impacted individuals into higher education. So I'm really looking forward to hearing this conversation today and introducing you all to the great work of the Berkeley Underground Scholars. We are ready to get started, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Ji Su Yoo, who is going to provide a little bit of background for today's discussion and then help introduce our great panelists. So Ji Su is a PhD student at the UC Berkeley School of Information, where she focuses on the intersection of technology and inequality and social computing using mixed methods. She's particularly interested in technology-mediated harms, such as the effect of platform abuse, misinformation, and surveillance. Ji Su, welcome. Over to you.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks for organizing this. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to introduce our panelists, who really are kind of the meat of this entire webinar, who have a lot to tell us and show us and share with us that, you know, these topics, specifically the way that they're engaged with in privacy, security, it's really difficult because they're not really grounded in a lot of the stories and in a lot of the experiences of the people who are kind of experiencing the technologies and the harms at disproportionate rates. So with that, I ask you to really engage with everybody here. And I'm going to introduce very briefly each of our panelists, and then they'll just kind of go in more depth. So we have Eli here, very decorated scholar, fourth year undergraduate sociology major with a public policy minor. And I mean, amongst many things, Regent Scholar, Chancellor Scholar. So these are all like the top scholars in the entire school in the UC system. And Eli focuses on urban marginality with a focus on technologies of policing, social theory, and labor. And then we have Conan. Conan is up next. And Conan is a data science major here at UC Berkeley. They transferred to UC Berkeley, and they have been working really at the center of looking at policing technologies, right? Algorithms that assess risk for bail review, all of the kind of hot topics in HCI and fairness and algorithmic transparency. Next, and finally, we have Shani. Shani is the college program coordinator. And Shani, I believe, was also a student at Berkeley, but is now working at Berkeley in the UC Underground Scholars program overall. Shani very impressively set up an entire program that helps with this pipeline of bringing in students into higher education. And Shani majored in African-American studies with a minor in education. So with that, welcome everybody. Do you want to give us a little bit more information on yourselves that you want to share, and that will give everybody some background knowledge on what is important to you?
Yeah. Conan, do you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
You can go ahead.
All right, cool. So my name is Shani Shea. Like the slide says, sorry, I am a goofball. And all right, so a little bit about me is I came into UC Berkeley in 2019, came through the pandemic. So really actually worked a lot with technology and seen technology change drastically and get like way more normalized into society as I was there. And I work with incarcerated youth and youth who are also systems impacted. I did develop the Incarceration to College and Pathways to College program. Surveillance for me is very important because when we think about surveillance, you know, I don't know if anyone's ever read the new Jim Code, right? And this talks about how the Jim Crow laws are now in, it's written into our code. We don't even recognize it because racism is so insidious, right? And white supremacy is so insidious. So, just being mindful that the whole technique of surveillance started from surveying slaves and surveying people who were not determined to be human beings or as good as human beings in this country to perpetuate a system of slavery, which we all still live off of, right? And that's what we know now as mass incarceration. And so to just be really mindful that it's not only affecting people that look like me, it affects so many of us from so many different backgrounds. However, surveillance is very, very often the key which allows for those apparatuses to be so powerful. So that's why I'm here today in terms of my background there. And then I'll pass it to any one of my brothers.
Yeah, thank you, Shani. My name is Connor Minahan. I'm a data science major here at UC Berkeley. My experience as a data science major and coming up through a lot of the coursework, particularly when we studied the COMPAS algorithm and California prison realignment, was very, I guess, surreal, because I was a data point in both of these, having taken the COMPAS algorithm when I was in county jail, and also being a data point on the prison realignment and having intimate knowledge of how that data was collected, and a bit of confusion in the conversation around it, as where a lot of these initial experiences of the data collection and what the data means and what doesn't are overlooked. And so therefore, I like to bring my perspective of not just being a data scientist, but also having been formerly incarcerated, definitely can add to this conversation.
And lastly, so yeah, my name is Eli Martinez. As Ji Su mentioned earlier in the introduction, so I'm a fourth year undergraduate, sociology major, public policy minor. I'm currently awaiting PhD admissions decisions from programs across the country. So fingers crossed that I get good news here coming up in a couple of weeks. So yeah, like Ji Su mentioned, like my research interest, I'm really engaged in research here on campus. I'm part of a lot of research teams, and I also have done a couple self-generated research projects. But yeah, my research interests are focused at the intersection of urban marginality with a particular focus in technologies of policing, social theory, and labor. Some of the projects that I am currently working on is, so one of the ones is exploring the experiences and post-incarceration employment prospects of individuals who have engaged in wildland firefighting while incarcerated in California's fire camps. And then I'm also working on completing my honors thesis, which I'm researching the sort of little known effects of secondary effects and harms of probation and parole on the family members of those who are subjected to it. So yeah, just a little bit about myself. Happy to be here.
Thank you all. As you can tell, we're working with just really impressive, kind of well-established in their fields scholars who have thought really deeply about these problems. And Conan, you kind of got into this a little bit, but I would love for you all to give us a little bit of a take of what you've witnessed or personally experienced in terms of the ways that these technologies are facilitating, enabling, or what we're calling technology-mediated, right? And these harms are often pretty abstract, and we talk about them, as you know, Conan, in academia and in industry in a very vague way. So if you could ground our understanding of what these technology-mediated harms look like, how they materialize, that would be great.
Yeah, I think, the beginning of them, and this, is the purpose why we're here, is that in the creation of them, the people who they affected most aren't in the room. And an example that might not be on some people's radar in here is, it's well known that a lot of the population in county jails, state prisons, and federal prisons are diagnosed with mental illnesses. And for instance, how that affects people getting care, and we know certain populations, people of color, people who were foster youth, coming into places of incarceration are overrepresented. And you have a system where in order to get healthcare, mental health care, custody has to be informed. And then you later put conditions on custody in your housing, and later put conditions on down the line on your probation. And how this data about people is transmitted about them and how it affects their decisions about receiving care has effects, on their, even their longevity, their health, their longevity. And thus, on the other side, their families and their communities, and how these, a lot of issues like, a lot of manic depression, PTSD, how these things are later expressed in the communities when they're not received care, because that data is transmitted and kept on them and made available to people who shouldn't have it. And I wonder how this is allowed under HIPAA. I don't really know how that is legal, but it's something that's a common practice. I think that's a good example.
Yeah, and I think the communities that study privacy and security often forget that the consequences are very acutely felt and experienced, and the decision-making process is something that is affected in a way that I think it's difficult for people who haven't been constantly over surveilled are always kind of cognizant of. It's in the back of many of the decisions. So thanks for sharing that. Shawnee, do you have any perspectives that you want to share with us?
Yeah, certainly. Like, just two things come to mind for me. So one, I was on probation and I had a kiosk, right? So for those of you that are not on probation, like determining your type of probation, it wasn't even determined on like my crime per se. It was just the type of probation that I had. You have to check in with your probation officer, right? And so this probation that I specifically had, my probation officer was a kiosk. I would come to a kiosk, I would press a button and say I was there, and that was my check-in. And so it seemed like, okay, this is okay, but my probation officer never got to know me, right? And so if you know anything about probation officers have almost complete control over your life. So if you do something that is in any inkling a way that can be interpreted as a violation of their command, then you're violating, right, your probation. And even like strip down butt naked and let me go inside your coochie right now, right? Like we about to do that. That's your probation. So it's very important that the person that has control over your body knows you, right, very personally. So the kiosk never knew me, and I had my daughter was a newborn and she was 7 months, and I'll never forget, I got violated. And when I went to court, I got taken to jail. And I remember being so taken aback. Like, this lady doesn't even know me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm even getting emotional right now. She didn't know my experience because I was only checking in through that kiosk. And then a secondary anecdote is when I had left my housing because I experienced like extreme domestic violence from the age of like 17 to 28. And so when I left that, I thought that I was protected by law to get housing. You know what I'm saying? I thought I'm a domestic violence survivor. I have a young child. My daughter was only 6 years old. And so I went to my mom's house. I lived there for like a year and a half so I could really get on my feet. You know, I was like refiguring everything out. I had been in that relationship for so long and from such a young age. And I tried to get housing and I fucking won the Oakland lottery. Oh, sorry for cussing. Sorry about that. So I won the Oakland lottery in housing, which is so hard to win. Okay, like it's very difficult to win. And they denied me because of a background check that was old, that was incorrect. And this just, once again, that's that surveillance. You know what I'm saying? And like that almost broke me. So I don't want to go on forever with my stories, but yeah, those are two. And people have hella more though. That's what I will say.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And I mean, these stories that you share are so kind of evident of the role that technology is playing. And I think your analysis is it's really valuable because you know exactly what points technology is coming in and messing with how you might kind of benefit from what is owed to you, right? From society, the protections that it's supposed to give. So thanks for sharing. I know it's probably not the easiest stories to tell.
May I piggyback off that?
Yeah.
That was a really good point. Yeah, that just real short, just that data was made available to people who should never had it in the first place. And what decision-making power does it really give them? You know, currently a lot of like Airbnb and other sharing economy apps and companies are using people's data to deny them access to something everyone else has access to. So as they're taking up, as you know, more and more of the housing is getting committed to that, people who are already in danger of homelessness and housing security are now denied more places. So there's an acceleration just because this data is spread so far and wide, and because it's out there, oh, let's use it when it has no value and it's dangerous.
Yeah, and I'll just like add to that, like that's the negation of a basic human right. Like in the most like wealthy country in the history of the world, like we're denying like a basic human right to individuals or populations that are already marginalized and stigmatized as it is. So it's really something interesting.
Thanks, everyone. Eli, you kind of got at this where, you know, we're going like 1,000 feet up and thinking about it, perspective of communities and populations and communities that you are a part of and you identify with, but also have been fighting for and advocating for a really long time. Can you give us a little bit of a perspective of just opinions or your assessment of what's going on in terms of the group and community aspect? How is technology really harming and playing a role of accelerating, as you said, Conan, and the problems that we're seeing already?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that as it is, like these harms already affect as a whole marginalized communities, right? So in a subset of this are individuals that have been impacted by the criminal legal system and also their families. Sometimes we don't consider the families of these individuals too, who are also experiencing like secondary or even vicarious effects of, you know, because these individuals don't exist in a vacuum. Like we have relational attachments to family and kin. So I think something that we should really think about, like aside from like the social and physical harms that we're starting to see associated with technology-mediated harms, there's also a growing body of literature that's showing how it's also eroding like the trust that individuals have with these institutions. So there's one well-known research study that was published in 2018 that showed that how individuals and their families who experience like the pains of the penal system, which are now being amplified by technology-mediated harms, they're also experiencing a sense of, or a sort of erosion of the social and political status that they perceive themselves to hold, which in a way kind of like creates this positive feedback cycle, which feeds their legal cynicism and erodes the legitimacy that they hold for formal agencies. So I think there was like another study too that showed how even minimal contact with the criminal legal system has been demonstrated to fuel what's called in the literature systems avoidance. And this is where individuals avoid surveilling institutions like banks, surveilling unnecessary institutions like banks, hospitals, the labor market, and even educational systems. And so in terms of like widespread impacts, the unintended consequences of these technologically like mediated harms include that these populations then go on to avoid, or our communities go on to avoid these necessary institutions, which then only further entrenches social marginalization and accelerates like downward mobility for individuals.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, Eli, like what systems avoidance? So I'm taking that with me. Yeah, you know, like I was nice to be able to share like a personal aspect, but the reality is like, yeah, it is just really those stories extrapolated over and over again. And in terms of I mean, I really honestly don't think that I could have said it any better than what Eli said. Yeah, we are scared to go into any place that we think we're going to be surveyed. We know that we're being watched even when we're not being surveyed. So another point, like an extra added research could be, how do we take that into our daily personal lives and interpersonalize the fact that we are constantly surveyed on a regular basis, and that it is not something, number one, that we ask for, or that creates like any type of healing or supportive space in the community. But and as we use these terms communities, it's important to acknowledge how all of whatever community you identify with, it's an intersection of community, right? So there's no way that something's going to affect my community and it doesn't somehow affect your community. And being mindful, right, of like how when we create these type of surveillances, how when we support policies that use these type of surveillances, right, as ways to like get things done in our country, it's really important that we acknowledge that we actually all are affected, right? And not to just look at it as like, okay, this is a specific community problem, especially if we are the people that are perpetuating these tools, right? Be really mindful of that, how that also affects a community.
I'd like to add, like, also in the creation of them, who really knows the effects of it? Like, just an anecdote, oftentimes, yeah, I hear conversations, people saying, oh, 2 years is 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 15 years life is not enough for this person. And it's like, how do you know what that means? Like, I mean, I did 5 years. I don't know much the difference between 4 years and 5 years and 5 years and 6 years. But certainly the people making the decisions don't, because there's so few people who have been there who have understands what it's like to be taken out of your family, your community, from everything you know, and locked in a cage. So just the creation of these things are made way far removed from the people affected by them most. And the more they're affected by them, the less they're in the space where they're made. And so that's a cycle that really needs to be broken. Right there is, how do we get more people who are most affected in the decision-making process?
Right, use the surveillance for that. Survey everybody, find out who could do the job and who's been affected, because it's not that we can't use it. So we'll give that, right?
Yeah, these technologies and these data points that you're talking about, Conan, they just like follow you forever. And I think what we should really, really draw from is the fact that we don't know, as you all say, right? We don't know how it's continuing to affect us. And they don't make it easy even to know that this is happening in the background, right? And I wonder if you all can tell us about how you got that sense that surveillance is happening to me and it will follow me and it's happening to other people. What exactly clues you into that? And like when you feel the consequences of that, are there any kind of methods that you've seen people take on to challenge them or to kind of work around these, totality of surveillance systems?
I would say it's against the code to talk about those methods. Have I seen people try to escape surveillance? I think, when you asked that question, I said, I don't know, I've probably been being surveyed since the day I was born. And once again, to really hone in on the point that I made in the beginning, surveillance is literally a technology used to support. Why else reason do you have to survey somebody? If you create a community with resources, where people have what they need, where people are checking on each other, where they're using the foundation of Ubuntu, which is interconnectedness, you don't need to be surveying people because you know that everybody is okay because you're working together as a community. This idea of surveillance, especially in the institution of Berkeley, where I know capitalism is so talked about, this is what it looks like to make money off of human beings. We are a slave nation. We have been having the most slaves since the beginning of slavery, the chattel slave system, I should say, and we still have the most slaves. And technology is the going thing. We use technology for everything else. Why in the world would we not use technology to create a bigger and broader and more insidious slave system, right? As Conan mentioned, you're talking about my surveillance never leaves me. My record never leaves me. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter what life and world that I change. You carry it forever. So when you say, when is the first time I knew I was going to be surveyed? My whole life, I'm a Black person. I knew that. I was taught that, raised, or else I would not be here today. I might be dead, right? And what do we use to get away from the police? We use our common sense, right? And you can look at that in Negro spirituals, right? And that the fact that there was actually codes written into them songs. You can look at that into every way that we've resisted through and through is by resisting their surveillance. So it is imperative, right? Once again, and I'm going to say this to my Black brothers and sisters that are watching this or on the call, or anybody that got a message to their Black brothers and sisters that they love. It is imperative that we be in this field. It is imperative that we make these decisions, because this is literally what is going to lead the system that we have been living on for so many years. And so, really, I mean that.
Yeah, and kind of like piggybacking off of what Shawnee's saying, like, I want to hold on to that aspect there, the dynamic of resistance, right? In terms of like solutions and preventative measures that like I think that can be effective for us. So I think I'll kind of want to premise it with saying, you know, surveillance and surveillance technologies like have now been married with the criminal legal apparatus, right, and policing in all aspects of the criminal legal system, right? So I think that there's always going to be conversations about like reform and like how we can make the apparatus or like the system better, more inclusive, or even just, right? But I personally, like, I don't think that like these promissory proclamations could provide the most comprehensive solutions that our communities actually need. And it's because of this that I think that abolition is the only solution in effectively addressing these issues as a whole. So like, what do I mean like when I'm saying like abolition, right? So abolition as a political vision, right? A structural analysis of oppression and a practical organizing strategy. So I know that like when people hear abolition, they might think of it as primarily as a negative project, you know, like let's tear everything down tomorrow and hope for the best. But that's not what I'm like trying to refer to here. I'm trying to refer to abolition as a whole, as a vision of restructuring a society as a world where we have everything that we need, which includes food, shelter, education, health, art, beauty, clean water, and more, right? Things that are foundational to our personal and community safety. So for me, abolition is a positive project, right? That focuses in part on building a society where it's possible to address harm without relying on structural forms of oppression or violent systems that increase it. And something that's increasing it right now is technologically mediated harms. So when speaking as abolition as a solution, I think the focus should be in seeking what's called transformative justice, which takes as a starting point that what happens in our interpersonal relationships is only mirrored and reinforced through larger systems. And so with transformative justice, the key is to think through and develop as a community, right? Solutions that respond to violence and technologically mediated harms in a way that doesn't cause more violence and harm.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to something Eli said and then something Shawnee said. And if you think about it, it's not the most imaginative go-to that somebody did something wrong and hurtful, also somebody who most often had been through a lot of trauma themselves, and let's put them in a space, let's you know, what is a legal form of kidnapping, right? Incarceration, right? Let's take them from where they are, take them away from all their property, family, everything they know, and put them somewhere that is going to be an incredibly traumatic place where they're going to have crimes committed against them very often, and they're going to witness it. And they're going to be around a bunch of other people who have a lot of trauma, and people are going to come out more traumatized. And we expect this to be a really good solution. Like, it's not the most thought out, even though there's been so much energy over the centuries and thought into creating it, it's not the most imaginative way to solve problems in society. And with that said, to answer the question directly about when did I become most aware of surveillance, I mean, there was an acute, there's a certain understanding of it prior, but you know, when I was first arrested, right, and I go into county and they strip you down, have you lift up parts of you and turn around and look in there. And it became, and then you look on the phones, and the phones say you're being listened to, and you know, you're through this process of your family visits you, you're on the, through the glass, they're on the phone, everything's recorded. There's, and then, out on bail for a little while, you're just very, very aware that everything you do and say is watched. And you really have to, you really can't be safe, and you have to act a certain way all the time. And when you're out, knowing you have no Fourth Amendment right also, like, I can be pulled over and I have to let them search me. My parole agent can come to my place anytime and, search my room and, disrupt, my roommates and family. So it's a constant reminder of the power they have over you. But there was an acute recognition of it for me upon my first arrest. But yeah.
Can I just make this like on crazy for y'all, right? So imagine this, because this is what we're all saying, right? The question was posed here. We don't know where it's going to go. We use the technology. We don't know where it's going to go. This is where it's going to go, okay? The probation officers already said that they don't even have enough time to be meeting with the people that they're surveying, right? Or to give them the resources that they need, or to do the job that they need. We already see this happening, right? In other countries and across the state. Okay, so what comes next? A drone comes next, or something that has no human or emotional understanding. And I'm gonna say no human or emotional, because I'm not gonna go against my AI family. You know what I'm saying? They probably got strong emotional recognition, but the reality is that doesn't have what we have in terms of discernment. Right. And once again, that building that connection, the algorithm is built, right? If such and such smiles at you every time you walk to the door, drone, sir, you know what I'm saying? We building that. The humans are still controlling that, right? And so to be really mindful that where this goes is that we go into a society where certain groups of people have been determined to be inhumane, where we perpetuate a system because we're dependent on it to bring money in, because we don't use nothing else, because we don't educate our people, because we don't give them liberation, because we don't do all that. So we're dependent upon the carceral system. And then you literally have a system where we just saw in San Francisco, can the bots use lethal fire? Who are they going to use lethal fire on? Who's going to use lethal fire on right now? Right. It's going to be the same thing. Only this time it's going to be with a robot. Only this time it ain't. Who is you about to protest when it's a robot? I'm just saying, right? And like, I know that might sound crazy to y'all, but that's actually what we're talking about. That's actually like what we're talking about. It's happening in real time. And we have to be mindful. And every moment when you making a decision, every decision counts. Right. And the moment when you think it don't count, just imagine that if one day somebody mistakes you for a Black person, right? Oh my God, your life could end. Just be mindful of that, right? Just think about that, what that really means. And I hate to say it so bluntly, but that's the reality. Or a previously incarcerated person, right? You don't have to be Black. But now, you know what I'm saying? That's our level of surveillance. And that's really where we'll go, because technology is a wonderful thing and it does help. But just to be really clear about that.
Thanks, everybody. I wish we could continue just learning more from all the insight you have. I don't think we even touched the surface of the ways that, or all that we can really learn from the fact that you've been thinking about this problem, you've lived it, and there is so much of a dissonance. You all talked about this, right? You're in UC Berkeley, it's surreal, right? They're talking about these technologies as though they're these things that just happen to people who they've never met. They don't understand what their lived experience is. So thank you so much for sharing all that you did share with us. With that, I just want to remind the audience that they can put in the Q&A questions. We'll turn to those right after this very last question that I'm going to ask our panelists, which is sort of, Shani, you touched on this a little bit, where there's so much promise in technology, right? And then there are all these problems. So for our audience, what is the one thing that research really does need to do? One kind of problem that if you could put 1,000 minds to work on this and to solve, right? What would that be, right? You all kind of gave this imperative call for the audience and for everybody who works on these technologies to say, hey, this is such a big issue. So if you could give us like one takeaway that you want everyone to go with, and then maybe a little bit on what future that really would bring to fruition.
I guess Eli kind of started it, abolition framework, right? You have to understand, and I feel like I said it a few times. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's not about, oh gosh, for who, oh my God, pity. It's like, bruh, we here now, all right? And if we continue to have a system, an economic system, this is like blatant, clear, that depends on incarceration and slavery, then we will continue these type of systems. It does not go another way. It's like saying that we have a system that serves orange juice, but we ain't making no oranges. You get it? You have to make a slave in a slave system. It has to happen. And so what I would say is focus on tearing that down, because people live and breathe on that. You feel me? That is funding how we're living through the world in many different ways, right? Like so many different ways I can't even get to on this one in this call. And secondarily, building something different up, right? So now we have to look at, okay, what do we do? What can we create and what can we build? Or do we change our system completely where we don't have to produce? Whatever it is, though, something has to change. We're not going to get around the issue, right? We can make it look different. We can make it look pretty, but that's what I give to you, that it doesn't mean that you go and you quit because, oh my gosh, it's so hard. How could I tear down a system? What you have to understand, though, is that you are a very powerful individual, and there's no telling what you can do if you put your mind to it. So at least have your mind on the right accord, right? And that's the best way I can say it. And I would, and put Black women first, all right? For real. Put us first, put us at the head of things. We will do our very, very best. I give you that.
Yeah, bouncing off of that, like centering our communities, right? Centering like our voices, but like not in a savior complex type of way, right? Like we don't need no saving. Like I think it was Glennie Martin, who's an activist, that said that the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So if you lift up those who are closest to the problem and give their action support, you know, we're worthy of these resources, just like everybody else is receiving. You know, so don't just like center our voices, but like have us bring us to the table too, and don't bring us to the table in a way that is patronizing or exhibiting like some sort of savior complex or anything like that, like I'm saying, but like, you know, like help us create like this pipeline for us to also be able to add our contributions or our lived experiences to these technologies that are, you know, impacting our lives and disproportionately so.
Yeah, and on that, with the pipeline, where is the pipeline coming from and to, right? There's a lot of, you know, currently what composes a lot of people who make technology and industry and academia is not people who come out of prison and not the people who are in the communities affected most. And so there needs to be an intentional process to redirect some of the input, which will mean taking it away from some other places. But yeah, like, you know, it currently, one thing, like with the current laws they passed on California's math education in the junior colleges, it's really decreasing the pipeline of transfer students in the STEM, and most formerly incarcerated students are transfer students. And there's very, very few of us who are formerly incarcerated who are involved in STEM. And part of it would be reducing a lot of those barriers. Math education, education in prison, right? I couldn't take any of the upper math classes I needed. I could do some correspondence courses via mail, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get any STEM education in there. And those are the people we need in STEM. So yeah, I would definitely say ways on growing the pipeline into these companies, into these labs, definitely being very intentional about getting people who can provide the right insights and the right perspectives to make these technologies not harmful and also produce more good.
Thank you all for leaving the audience with very concrete to do. So I'm going to turn to maybe one or two of the Q&A I think you all can see them, but the first one, I'll just do them all at once and you can pick and choose which one you actually want to devote some time to, since we're coming up close to the end. So we have one question that talks about digital data breaches and how people who are incarcerated, what are the ways that justice and advocacy can be sought or can't be when a data breach happens. Specifically, I think because of all the surveillance and data that is collected. The second question is about integrating technology. So specifically when it comes to communication, such as providing tablets and learning devices, what is the panel's perspective on the rate of this integration? I think it is referring to specifically preparation for people who are incarcerated. And then last, we have how much technology has been normalized during the pandemic. So maybe a few more details. I think so talking about arraignment hearings that were happening on Zoom, how has technology changed or grown in the pre-incarceration justice process? So all of them are up for grabs, whichever one you want to address. Eli, I think you wanted to talk about the second one.
Yeah, in terms of the nuances between incarcerated and law enforcement spaces, I feel like there's a great disparity in terms of the means and ends that are incorporated within those two spaces, right? So I think Taylor mentioned specifically when it comes to communication with like providing tablets and learning devices. So let's compare that and compare it to, so what are the ends of that like, right? So for people that are currently incarcerated to be able to educate themselves, and make themselves into better people, and also to communicate with their families, which is vital for individuals once they are released to be able to quote unquote like reintegrate into society. But on the other end, we have law enforcement spaces, right? So to what ends are these the integration of technologies being used here? I don't think it's to be able to create spaces of healing and communication between individuals and their families, or to better like these individuals, but rather I think it's the rapid integration specifically of machine learning models into certain police technology that I think is very worrisome. So I think when we're talking about like these two specific spaces, we should really think about like what are the ends that they're wanting to achieve.
This one is like, I'm gonna get right to it. So I've, worked with incarceration in college for over 3 years. I've worked with hundreds of youth that are incarcerated, right, across the Bay Area. So here's how it goes, right? Real life. They give the youth the tablet, right? And then they don't give it, they give so much restrictions, right? Number one, so you're not able to really communicate with all these different people. It's a set thing of what's even on the tablet, right? So talking about technology, right? There's technology, people who are determining what's on the tablet, and then the fact that they have this tablet. But then on the other hand, when you want them to go to community college, they don't have access to the computer. They don't have free access to a computer that has a Word document. So they give them a tablet where they can only watch Disney videos or whatever they got up on there. They can't do Word. They can't practice their literacy, right? They're not being able to practice any real skills. And then when it's time to go to school, they don't give them access. The youth that I work with, Brett, they literally come home and tell me they don't need, it's like the way that they're training the minds of them just to be on this really sick schedule, because y'all don't understand how jail is. You're stuck in your room, you know what I'm saying? Or you're just in the pod, you're never leaving. So it's really very problematic. It's kind of just like what Eli said. What is these two ways, right, that is going on? But there's in access whenever it'll liberate your mind. And the reason they do that is because not only could you educate yourself, but you could possibly escape. And the last thing they want for one of their little incarcerated slaves is to escape. And so they only give them enough technology to dumb them down. That is really very sick.
And to follow that, I remember on my 27th birthday, man I was doing time with, he was like, I've been locked up for 27 years, this week. So, he was 54 and he was about to get out. And sometimes there's people leaving, and seeing this also when I was back out on the streets and tutoring at San Diego City College, older men typing like this, right? people who've never learned to use a computer, who've never used the internet, are coming out, are coming out into this world. Been locked up since the 90s, 80s. And they're coming out into they might have had been able to use Word maybe a few times. I remember when I had a job in education, and we were inputting scores on an Excel spreadsheet on one computer, and we had to bring it to the teacher. I'm like, oh, do I just drop it in the network or something? And she hands me a floppy disk. And so it's just the exposure people are having to technology is totally creating a gap between them and everybody else. And for some, so for people who are maybe millennials and can adapt, and Gen Z and can adapt, but for people who are Gen X and baby boomers have been locked up for a long time, there's a massive gulf that in getting the technological literacy. It's so yeah, there needs to be a big, and also if people, when I was in, there was no access to internet whatsoever if you were to use a computer at all. None. None. Not for education, not for anything. And if somebody doesn't learn how to use the internet, how do they interact with society? How they interact with their family? How they interact with in education? Additionally, I think a big issue also, my cousin was locked up in Tennessee, and she had a tablet. She'd call me on it. We talk, and I have a buddy that I keep in touch with, and he called me up on his tablet. But also not just CDCR. I mean, when you use a phone, there may be somebody listening to it. There may not be, right? But but now that you have all your everything being stored, all the data being collected on you, and they're not just surveilling the individual inside, they're surveilling the loved ones and friends and everybody, so they're going far beyond. So it's like, so they're going far beyond just even surveilling that individual, and the degree in which they're surveilled now, and the degree in which the population is very frightening. So people need more access to the technology. The strings attached to it are also quite high. You have to, in order for you to be able to talk to your loved ones, in order for you to be able to get acquainted with some technology, now you have to give all this information about yourself and the people you care about for the company. I think JTL, GTL, and CDCR for them to use that.
And it is also re-traumatizing, because you in a space where you being traumatized and that you cannot have a free conversation no matter what you do, right? And so that's really anyways, that's where we see also these secondary things coming on top of it.
Yeah, you can't tell them what's bothering you, what's really hurting you. Like, you're in this, you can't talk to a lot of people around you because it might not be safe. You can't talk to a therapist. You can't talk to your loved ones. So you have to hold all this in yourself and deal with it.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know kind of the reality, right? Like, humans are not these just atomized creatures. We have multi-dimensional needs. So thanks for bringing that kind of to the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, just every time, sorry, my bad, Ji Su. Every time you get on the pod and you about to go in, right? Ask yourself if you would say something if it was recorded. Ask yourself if you would text what you were texting to other people if you knew that someone was watching it. Most of the things we just simply would not say for so many different reasons. And that is not no way to live. And consider that the effects, right, once again, of this level of surveillance, and also people having control of your information, how that affects how you act in the world. It really, it's very real.
Yeah, how they would hear it and also use it against you. You have this feeling everything is used against you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us very real answers to things that are difficult to talk about, and also things that most people, even if they hear, wouldn't understand. And I think that frustration is something that you did talk about, right? The lack of representation and the kind of savior complex, dismissive attitudes towards making sure that these perspectives are lifted up and kind of used properly. So before we end, there was a question that went away, but is there anything that people can do to support the Underground Scholars Initiative? Or are there any organizations that you're like, if you want to learn more, you need to help this particular mission, you need to know about these specific people? If you have any, briefly mention them, and then we'll give it back to Rachel to close out.
In response to that question that Taylor posed, I linked the best way that you can help support us here at Underground Scholars, which if we don't have like our material conditions met, then we have no time to be able to think through and like work and engage with our community. So the best way that I think that you could help support the mission of the Underground Scholars at UC Berkeley is by being able to provide any monetary funds to be able to like help expand and grow. And we do a lot of work here within the Underground Scholars. And Shani and Conan, I don't know if you guys want to like talk about like just all the breadth of programs that we have for individuals and stuff, but I think that's the best way that you can help support.
Thank you so much, Eli. Yeah, for sure. Money always helps. I like people power. We got a lot of stuff that be needing to be done for sure. If you want to come into juvenile and tutor some youth, if this is data science majors, I got a few youth that are actually taking community college CIS classes. So email me. I'll go through it with you, get you hooked up, and I'll guide you through so that you don't feel uncomfortable there. So I think we need people writing back to the people in jail. Always people in the incarcerated scholars program. So yeah, we need money for sure. You know what I'm saying? But we also need time and power, like manpower.
Yeah, and for the people who are in, for the people who are out but trying to transfer here, and also for the scholars here, collaborate, give them research positions, give them jobs, have them help you on your projects, have them help you on their projects, have them bring their knowledge and intimate experience into the important work you're doing. And in addition, another organization that I would like to put a plug in for, Redemption Row, California. I'm gonna do some data analysis for them. It was founded by people on the inside of Donovan State Prison. And what they do is they prepare lifers for parole. And it's about evidence-based methods to find what produces parole being granted and what reduces rehabilitation. We're going to be starting a curriculum that we're going to be a mail order correspondence program, but that would be an amazing organization to support.
Yeah, here at Underground Scholars, I help manage our incarcerated scholars program. So we correspond with currently incarcerated folks throughout the state. I help manage a team of interns that we like correspond with them. Just within like the last year or so, we've sent out like over like 300 letters and stuff to folks, and we get letters from folks like all throughout the state. And a lot of these folks and individuals are also like interested in data science and those kinds of pathways. So if anybody, and they're always asking if they could like link up with like any mentors or individuals who are in the field. And we don't have those many. Like Conan is like one of the individuals that I know that's an underground scholar. Like we don't have those many like individuals. So if anybody would want to, be able to create that connection and provide like the mentoring and support for individuals who are about to get out, like we're more than welcome to.
Thank you all. Okay, so everybody in our audience, you know what you have to do. You know what has been, the case in all of the programming that these experts have been doing. So we encourage you to reach out and also to kind of take up the call. Rachel, do you want to close us out?
I sure will. Thank you so much, Ji Su, and thank you very, very much, Eli, Shani, and Conan, once again for a really fantastic discussion. Really appreciate each of you bringing your unique lenses to these really important issues. We could and should spend many more hours talking about these problems and what it will take from all of us to implement the solutions that you all were talking about. So I know I'll be mulling these ideas over, and I hope the rest of our audience will too. But thank you so much, each of you, for participating today. Before we close, I'm going to share my screen once again to quickly acknowledge our various CLTC supporters, community partners, foundations, and industry folks who help support our mission and help make events like this possible. Most importantly, I would like to share a few ways that you can stay in touch with CLTC and our panelists. We might not have been able to get to all of your questions today, so we do have emails for each of our panelists. They've generously offered to stay in touch with anyone who would like to continue the conversation. Also some contact info for CLTC and the Berkeley Underground Scholars at the bottom of the screen. So please do follow us on Twitter, head to our respective websites and learn more about the research, the events, and the important initiatives that our respective organizations are up to. So I'll leave this slide up for a minute or two in case folks want to screen share or screenshot it and grab some of this information. So that'll do it for us. Thank you once again to everyone in the audience for joining us and asking some thoughtful questions. And we look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, take care.